It started as a normal morning until I heard heavy boots crunching through the gravel behind my workshop. When I looked up, a man in a dark tactical vest marked HOA Cop was already stepping onto my property, uninvited. His name tag read B. Morton. He had the stance of someone who thought a uniform made him invincible. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. I walked out from the shed, wiping oil off my hands. You're trespassing, I said, pointing to the gate sign that read private property, no entry without consent. Blake gave a smug smile. I'm conducting an HOA inspection. You've got unapproved structures here. Could be a fine, could be removal. Inspection? I repeated. You're not a cop. HOA has to give 72 hours notice for property checks under Texas Property Code 209.006. You skipped that, he shrugged. We don't need permission when there's a violation. I stepped closer. Actually, you do. That's criminal trespass, Texas Penal Code 30.05. You cross a posted boundary without consent. That's a Class B misdemeanor, and I can press charges. Blake's eyes narrowed, and his hand brushed against the holster on his belt. That's when I saw it, a black handgun. My pulse kicked up. I tried to keep calm. You're carrying a firearm while impersonating law enforcement. You realize that's a felony under Penal Code 37.12, right? His grin widened. You think this vest is fake? HOA authorized it. You don't get to question my authority. I could feel my jaw tightening. You're lucky my ring cam is recording this and not calling the sheriff right now. He stepped closer, boots kicking up dust between us. You do that, he said coldly. See how fast your little shed comes down once the board hears about your attitude. I didn't back down. Then go tell them yourself because you're done here. For a long second, we just stared each other down, my camera light blinking red, his hands still resting on that holster. Then he muttered something under his breath, turned, and stormed off toward his white truck parked by the fence. That should have been the end of it. But 2 hours later, when I went to check my mail, I found a citation taped to my box. An HOA violation notice, signed by Chairwoman Samantha Holt herself. Apparently, I was being fined $500 for interfering with HOA field enforcement. That was the moment I realized this wasn't some rogue officer. It was organized. The HOA was backing him up, and if they wanted to play dirty, I could play smarter. The next morning, the rumble of a white truck echoed down my driveway again. Same bold lettering on the vest, same smug expression. Blake Morton was back. Only this time, he wasn't alone. A woman I recognized from HOA meetings, Samantha Holt, sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed like a judge ready to pass sentence. He parked halfway across my lawn, crushing the edge of my flower beds like he owned the place. I was already recording before I even opened the door. Blake, I said evenly, you're trespassing again. I warned you yesterday. You and your board chair are both violating Texas Penal Code 30.05. I can have both of you arrested. Samantha rolled her window down, sneering. You're overreacting, Mr. Daniels. Blake's conducting an inspection for code compliance. HOA law permits access for enforcement. Not without notice, I snapped. You can't just storm someone's property with a gun and a badge that doesn't exist. That's impersonating a peace officer. You're lucky I haven't already sent the footage to the sheriff. Blake climbed out, hand resting on his hip holster again. Why don't you relax? We're just here to take photos. I stepped off the porch. Take your pictures from the street. That's public access. Step one more inch onto my land and you're breaking the law. Blake smirked. You really think you can threaten an enforcement officer? You're not an officer, I said, keeping my voice firm. You're a guy in a fake vest driving a white truck that's about to be impounded for trespassing. Samantha got out too, waving a clipboard. You signed the HOA charter, Mr. Daniels. That means you consented to inspections. You can't fight the law. I signed to maintain the streetlights, not surrender my property rights. Blake took another step forward, snapping pictures of my shed. I heard the sound of gravel crunching beneath his boots, and then his hand went to his holster again. Back up, I warned. He laughed, pulling the gun halfway free. You gonna stop me? Everything inside me went cold. My instincts, old training I'd buried years ago, kicked in. I raised my hands slightly, keeping my tone calm, but my stance ready. Put the weapon down, Blake. Drawing a firearm on a civilian without legal justification is aggravated assault under 2202. You'll go to prison for that. Samantha stepped back, realizing this had gone too far. But Blake wasn't listening. The barrel tilted toward me. That's when I slowly reached for my phone, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. This is your last chance, I said quietly. Holster it, now. Blake's jaw clenched. His finger twitched on the trigger. And then the wail of sirens cut through the air. The sheriff's cruiser slid to a stop by the gate, lights flashing red and blue across Blake's face. He froze, still holding the gun, as the deputy stepped out yelling, "Drop it! Now!" Blake's authority vanished in an instant, and I just stood there, camera still rolling, watching the fake HOA cop realize his world was about to collapse. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe because the story is only going to get better. Blake's gun hit the dirt before he even processed what was happening. The deputy had his weapon trained, shouting again, "Hands on your head! Step back!" Within seconds, two more patrol cars slid into view. The air was thick with sirens, gravel dust, and the sound of a man's ego shattering. Samantha tried to jump in. "This is a misunderstanding. He's with the HOA enforcement." The deputy shut her down immediately. "Ma'am, impersonating a law officer isn't enforcement. It's a felony." I handed over my phone, showing the video of Blake drawing his gun. "He aimed that at me on my own property," I said. "You'll find the footage timestamps line up with his entry onto my land." They cuffed him right there in the mud. His eyes darted everywhere, trying to find a way out, but the look on his face said it all. He knew his career, his freedom, and his little power fantasy were over. Samantha's defense crumbled the moment the sheriff's lieutenant arrived. He'd been briefed en route. "Mr. Daniels," he said, "you were within your rights to record and defend your property. Texas law is clear on this. Penal Code 9.31 and 9.41. You can use reasonable force to protect against unlawful entry or threats. And pulling a firearm? That's aggravated assault with a deadly weapon." Samantha stammered. "I didn't know he'd actually pull it." "Doesn't matter," the lieutenant replied. "You were aiding and abetting. You authorized him to be here." They separated the two. Blake was read his rights and placed in the back of a cruiser. His charges were heavy: aggravated assault, impersonating a public servant, and criminal trespass. Samantha faced criminal conspiracy for enabling him. The HOA board tried to play cleanup later that week, calling an emergency meeting. I showed up with my lawyer and a flash drive containing every second of video. The entire neighborhood turned out, even the ones who used to defend Officer Blake. When the footage hit the projector, you could have heard a pin drop. Blake yelling, the gun coming up, the moment his fake badge glinted in the light, all of it captured in crystal clarity. Samantha tried one last desperate line. "He was acting independently. The HOA can't be held responsible," my lawyer smirked. "Actually, under civil liability statutes, any board member who knowingly enables unlawful enforcement acts can be held jointly liable. You signed off on his inspection authority last week." The crowd gasped. A neighbor shouted, "She needs to resign." And she did, right there, on camera, trembling, her voice cracking as she muttered, "Effective immediately." A month later, Blake was sentenced to 6 years in Huntsville Correctional Facility. Samantha took a plea deal, community service, probation, and a permanent ban from HOA leadership. The entire board dissolved within weeks. Every day since, I've watched neighbors drive by slow, still whispering about that day the HOA cop tried to pull rank and ended up in handcuffs instead. And as for me, I didn't need to raise a gun or throw a punch. Just the truth, the law, and a camera that never blinks. Because sometimes that's all it takes to remind them you don't mess with a man who knows his rights. And that's how the so-called HOA cop lost everything: his gun, his job, and his freedom. Turns out, trespassing armed isn't enforcement, it's a felony. What do you think, folks? Did the HOA cop go too far, or did he get exactly what was coming to him? What would you have done if it happened to you? I'd really like to know. The end.